Okay. So thanks a lot, everyone. Hello and welcome, everyone. Hope I made some sense in my previous session where I talked about first war between India and Pakistan post-independence during 1947-48. And is my voice audible, Gautam? Hello.
Yeah, it is. It is a bit louder, perhaps. You can.
Okay. Hold on a second.
Hold on.
Hello.
It's better now.
Okay. All right,
No.
everyone. Today we will continue the series with another major military event that happened in 1962 between India and China. So before I dwell further, I again wanted to set expectation that this is not about blaming any name, place, person, or religion. Neither it is about raising questions on our leaders or how things have been done in past or where or what has been done in past. Rather, this session is more about learn from our history, our leaders, and to respect our nation and armed forces. I want to start by quoting my references as all the information in my slides is.
Can you be a bit louder?
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, this is better. Yeah, this is much better. Yes, thank you.
All right. So I want to start quoting my references as all the information in my slide is publicly available over internet and sourced from various books. Well, while researching for this topic, I found an apt picture on the India Today website that summarizes India-China War of 1962 in one single slide and says what we all generally know, is that China attacked India on October 20th, 1962. The war ended exactly 30 days later on November 20th, 1962, when China unilaterally announced a ceasefire. And as a result, we lost accession to China, and LAC, or line of actual control, came into existence. In this battle, India suffered heavy casualties and was was the biggest defeat to Indian army till date. So I can very well end my talk here right now, as that pretty much covers the war. But is the story that simple? Did we lost in just those 30 days? Was Indian army not a match for China's armed forces, or was it really an Indian army failure after all? We need to step back into the history to unravel the events that transpired 1962 war and how it defined the perennial fragility in our Indo-China relationship, which keeps on moving till date like a pendulum. So I hope you can read the text. The British strategy of over half a century of having an autonomous Tibet as a buffer was put to rest as India looked on passively. The Chinese takeover of Tibet by force exposed the northern borders of India to potential Chinese threat for the first time, highlighting our vulnerability. This is an excerpt taken from the book The McMahon Line, A Century of Discords, written by J.J. Singh. This pretty much sets the tone of the future events that were about to take place in Indian subcontinent, and that were about to change the course of history of India-China border or India-China relationship forever. Before we even start the story, this is very important. It is very important for us to understand and familiarize with the entire region and how it is laid out. Today we did a very good quiz on Kahoot about the Indian state and capitals. So it will be a quick refresher. So in the north, India's state Jammu and Kashmir, now Union Territory Ladakh, shares the border with China. So though it is in the north, let me quickly give you a perspective. Though it is in the north, so if you draw map north, this is north, south, east, pardon my bad handwriting, and west. So if you so though it is in the north of India, but looking from the Indo-China geographical perspective, this is the western side of the border. So you will keep on hearing this side as the western sector or the western border, right? Then we have states of Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh as border states sharing boundary with China. In the slides ahead and in the Indo-China history, you will keep hearing the term NEFA, NEFA or NEFA, which stands as Northeast Frontier Agency. So NEFA was one of the political divisions in British India and later Republic of India. It became Union Territory of Arunachal Pradesh on 20th January 1972 and received the status of state after 15 years on 20th February 1987. So for the sake of simplicity, you can memorize NEFA or NEFA, Northeast Frontier Agency, as today's Arunachal Pradesh state. And then we all know there is a Tibet. There's Tibet, which shares a large boundary with India, right? So overall, India shares a total boundary of approximately 4,000 kilometers with China, which is divided into three sectors. The Western sector. In the Western sector, India shares about 2,000 or 2,100 approximately kilometers long border with China, and it is between Jammu and Kashmir and now Ladakh and Xinjiang province of China. In this sector, there is a territorial dispute over accession. So this is the accession area. So there's a territorial dispute of accession. India claims it to be a part of Jammu and Kashmir, while China claims it to be a part of Xinjiang province. At present, LAC or line of control is the line separating the area of Jammu and Kashmir and accession. Pardon me, I am saying Jammu and Kashmir again and again. It is Ladakh now. So with the recent government change. So, but yeah, I hope you get the gist. Then there is the middle sector. So middle sector, India shares about around 600 kilometers long boundary with China, which runs along the watershed from Ladakh to Nepal. As you can see, the states of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand touch this border with Tibet or China in this sector, but both sides do not have much disagreements over this border in this area. Then the final eastern sector. This sector it has around 1100 kilometer long boundary with China. It borders Sikkim and runs from eastern limit of Bhutan, as you can see here, eastern limit of Bhutan to a point near Talu Pass at tri-junction of Tibet, India, and Myanmar. Here, right. So this boundary is also called McMahon Line. Now let's understand a bit more about McMahon Line. People also call it McMahon Line. I also used to call it, but it is not McMahon, it is McMahon. About McMahon Line and why it is so controversial and yet so important in this context. In 1914, during Shimla conference between British India, Tibet, and China, the chief British negotiator, Sir Arthur Henry McMahon, who you can see in this slide, proposed a boundary between India and Tibet, which was known as McMahon Line. This is that McMahon Line. China refused to sign the agreement. That agreement, as it never acknowledged Tibet as an autonomous country and treated Tibet as subordinate to China, and hence said that Tibet has no authority to sign any treaties. The treaty was still went ahead and signed by just British India and Tibetan representative, leaving the Chinese representative in the dark. Now, though the boundary was signed in 1914, it was not published up until 1938. You can imagine it took whole 28 years to make that boundary public. Now, China still considers McMahon Line illegal and unacceptable, claiming that Tibetans had no right to do so, as they were not as an autonomous body or autonomous state. So since then, India considered it as an international border between India and Tibet, whereas China does not recognize it. So that's the whole controversy of McMahon Line. Now that we have an understanding of the border between India and China, let us understand some dynamics of the two countries at the time that led to 1962 war. So it is very important to get that perspective before we jump onto that war. So what happened back in those days, India got independent, both were the young countries. So India got independent on August 15, 1947, as we all know, and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru became the first Prime Minister of India. Then just 2 years later, on October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong, also known as Chairman Mao, as you can see here, this person is Mao Zedong. right? Chairman Mao announced the formation of People Republic of China (PRC), as you often hear later on. After communist forces won a bloody civil war that was fought with Nationalist Party of China, supported National Party of China was also supported by capitalist countries like US, and because they were against the communist forces headed by Chairman Mao, right? So but they won the civil war and formed the People Republic of China in 1949. Now he was the founding father of PRC, and we often hear the word that Maowad or Maoists in India when reference to communist parties or Naxal movement is made within India. So the word Maowad came from the policies and principles of Mao. We can have the whole different discussion on how China influenced current Naxal movement in India and created a permanent internal chaos within the country to be dealt with. But anyways, moving on, another key person in this whole story is China's first premier, or as we can correlate it to prime minister, is Zhou Enlai. This is the person. This is spelled as ZHOU, Zhao, or but mostly pronounced as Zhou Enlai. So he ruled under Mao and was instrumental in China and its communist party's rise to power. Okay, so moving on, India and China had a good relationship, at least it was thought to be so, post-independence, or rather, or at least it seems like that until the war broke out in 1962, right? So India's policy towards China was always very unclear and hazy. Even though Western capitalist countries like US, Canada, Australia were opposed to Chinese communist regime, but we Indians recognized their communist government and gave them international recognition. If you can imagine, we lobbied for China. We lobbied for China to become a member of United Nations, not once but multiple times. So far, so that in 1950, Pandit Nehru declined the US offer. It was a US offer on the table, and this is a recorded thing. A US offer of permanent seat in the UN Security Council in lieu of China. And as you can see, we are still paying the price for this, as China recently used its veto power in the UN Security Council to offer protection to Mumbai attack mastermind Hafiz Saeed. So we are still paying the price of it. And in 1951, India even refused to attend the conference in San Francisco, where peace treaty was to be signed with Japan, because China wasn't invited. So we were so much in awe of China. We were supporting China's communist regime since its onset. India always thought China to be a good neighbor and never brought up any controversial issues in various meetings with Chinese counterparts, and kept on ignoring signs of its aggressive and hostile neighbor throughout the 50s decades, be it forceful capture of Tibet in 1950, signing of Panchsheel Agreement in 1954, Chinese unlawful construction in the region of Aksai Chin in 1957, or continuous skirmishes on the border, specifically after 1960s. So quickly, let's see each one of them in detail. Uh, uh, this is just a part one, so I'll wrap it up quickly in some time, and we'll continue with the part two later on. So soon after coming to power, communist China started to show its true colors. Now in 1950, it captured Tibet, that we all know, right? And the major implication of India, it had major implication of India. Why? Mainly because up until now, when we shared only a fraction of border, if you remember the maps, where the border with China was only a fraction of it up in the north with China's Xinjiang province. With the capture of Tibet, our border with China increased from northern to eastern front, spanning its states across Jammu and Kashmir, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh, leaving India prone to China's invasion. Right. So Pandit Nehru, who was the then prime minister and also he was the foreign minister of India, never refuted China on its invasion of Tibet. So and he never refuted China on the invasion of Tibet or their disowning of Dalai Lama, the head of Tibet state. Right. Instead, he decided to keep silent. Now, with the accession of Tibet, there was a new uncertainty about boundary, as China never recognized McMahon Line. That was well documented, right? So China never recognized McMahon Line and claimed even Arunachal Pradesh as South Tibet. However, Pandit Nehru never raised that boundary issue with China and instead waited for China to raise that boundary issue first. People like Sardar Patel and few other delegate members didn't agree to this policy. However, Pandit Nehru went ahead and announced in the parliament that in Jammu and Kashmir, and this was a formal parliament announcement, in Jammu and Kashmir, we already have a traditional border on the eastern front, and there is a clear definition of it defined by McMahon line, and hence there is no need to raise the boundary issue with China. So this was a formal announcement in a parliament to rest all the boundary issues in his own terms unilaterally. Now, well, in next few years, we had multiple meetings with China till 1954. China never raised that boundary issue as well. That made India think all is well. In Three Idiots notion, all is well, right? So on 25th April 1954, when Hindi Chini bhai bhai sentiment was soaring high, Panchsheel Agreement was signed between India and China. There were 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, and the world applauded it. What were the principles? Were mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, mutual non-aggression, mutual non-interference of each other internal affairs, equality and mutual benefit, peaceful coexistence. This was a golden agreement that were it would have been, if it would have been followed by spirit, then there would have been no war across the world. However, it was a diplomatic blunder for India, because this agreement gave the tacit approval for China's occupation of Tibet. Tibet, which was still now a disputed territory, became Tibet region of China. Moreover, with this agreement, Beijing got what it wanted. There was no mention of India-China formal border in that treaty, which Pandit Nehru used to consider as the rightful border of McMahon Line and in the Aksai Chin area. There was omission of Demchok Pass in the treaty. This left the door of Aksai Chin open for China. Again, it was all blurry. Then we had to remove our last Indian Jawans from the Tibet, which were holding the post. And we also have to surrender Indian telegraphic lines and guest houses in Tibet. Note that India and Tibet had not only the border overlap, but we also have cultural, religious, a lot of cross-border exchange on those lands were also there. That is a peaceful Buddhist monk region, and India always had a good relationship with that Tibetan region. So even in the future visits of Zhao Enlai or Chao Enlai to India, Nehru's visit to China, boundary issue never popped up. Another major eye-opening event that China did in September 1957, the embassy of China in Beijing made an official announcement of the completion of Xinjiang Tibet Road. A small scape map of the road was also issued. The only catch was, as you can see in the map, which is evident, that the road passed through India's territory of Aksai Chin. Now, this finally caught Delhi's attention, and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru wrote a formal letter to Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai, to which he never replied for 2 months. And after 2 months, when the reply came, it was not very India-friendly. We can assume that, and certainly not as per Pandit Nehru's expectation. So, but this particular region, the dispute over Aksai Chin can be traced back to the failure of British Empire to clearly demarcate a legal border between China and Indian colony, that then British Indian colony. So during the time of British rule, 2 borders between India and China were proposed by the name of Johnson Line and McDonald Line. So Johnson Line, which was earlier proposed in 1865, shows Aksai Chin in Jammu and Kashmir region, and it says that India controls that region, whereas McDonald Line, which was proposed in 1893 later on, places this Aksai Chin under China's control. Now, India considers Johnson's line as correct and the rightful border, and China considers McDonald Line as the correct border. So, somewhere deep down, Pandit Nehru accepted that the territory of Aksai Chin is disputed, and he even mentioned again once the parliament that it is stupid. Aksai Chin is a very barren terrain. People, people cannot live there. It's really inhospitable. So they were not. That's the reason there were not enough post or army movement there, or any patrolling were happening at that time. So Pandit Nehru made a formal comment in the parliament that it is stupid to fight with China over a piece of barren land where even a blade of grass doesn't grow. To which our eminent parliamentarian Shri Mahavir Tyagi responded by taking off his hat, a cap or topi that we call in Hindi, showing his bald head and saying, "No hair grows over here. chop off my head too. So this is the famous head of Mahavir Tyagi, as you can see. It is also barren. So having all this was going on, and then in 1959, there was a massive uprising in Tibet against China, which again was brutally suppressed by Chinese forces, following which hundreds of thousands of Tibetans and their spiritual leader, Dalai Lama, sought asylum in India. Now, Indian government decided to provide a refuge to Tibetans and Dalai Lama on purely humanitarian grounds. However, China viewed this as a hostile act. It really made Mao angry. So China viewed it as a hostile act from India and became suspicious of Indian actions. Now from there, Chinese government started alleging that India is instigating rebellion. India is moving across border to carry out subversion and sabotage in the Tibetan region. So the Chinese responded by increasing their military presence from that time onwards in the border area, which in August and October 1959 and onwards led to series of skirmishes that resulted in the deaths of several Indian bodyguards, several Indian border guards and soldiers. So that was all for today. I think we have a logical conclusion here, and next time we will discuss more about how the actual war happened and what we learned from it. What were the mistakes that we did during the war? How we ended up after the war, and what we took away. What were the takeaways from the war? So hope that made some sense. Over to you, Gautam ji and Amit ji. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhinavji.
Yeah, thank you, Abhinavji. I think that was that was very interesting, very interestingly put. Quite a prelude to the end that will be there next week for this one. So thank you, Abhinavji. Adiji, over to you.
Sangha